Welcome back to the Podcasting Problem Solver. I'm Leah Bryant, your go-to podcast growth strategist, here to coach you to podcast strategically for better results. So I've been watching podcasters work really hard lately, publishing consistently, promoting, tweaking everything they can think of, and still asking themselves the same question. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing, so why does this still feel so random? And if this sounds familiar, here's what I need you to hear. This is actually an investigation problem. So most podcasters are working hard, and sometimes too hard. They're reacting to the loudest metric. For instance, their downloads will dip. The panic sets in. Their downloads spike. Confusion follows. Their leads will stall. And suddenly it's, oh gosh, the algorithm hates me. And that reaction loop, it not only keeps you busy, but it also leaves you very confused. Because surface level data can look really convincing while telling you the completely wrong story. And I know this because before I ever touched a podcast strategy, I investigated fraud. Yep. And when I worked fraud cases, one rule mattered more than anything. And that is, the loudest clue is rarely the right one. So I was trained by the same consulting firm that trained the FBI, specifically in phone interrogations. I had to listen to breathing patterns, what was going on in the background, were there papers rustling, were there other people talking, were there changes in someone's voice inflections, things like that. My job was to look for patterns, right? Uncover what was really going on beneath the surface, and then connect the dots that others were missing. Fraud cases are full of distractions. Numbers that look suspicious, but really aren't. Patterns that seem obvious, but kind of fall apart under pressure. Those aha moments that turn out to be dead ends. And if I chased every red flag without context, I would waste weeks, sometimes months. The real work wasn't reacting in those moments, okay? It was when I was asking better questions. Questions like, what doesn't fit here? What pattern keeps repeating? Or what signal is being mistaken for noise or vice versa? And here's where everything clicked for me. When I moved into podcasting, I watched people do the exact same thing. Chasing downloads, overcorrecting based on one episode, and treating vanity metrics like the verdicts. It was all the same behavior, but just different data sets. So here's what I want you to understand. Stalled podcast growth is your feedback. It's really valuable feedback. You just have to know how to read it. So downloads alone don't necessarily tell you who your podcast is really reaching, or why people are clicking or not clicking, or what path listeners are taking after an episode, or where the trust is breaking down. But that's why the first phase of my seamless podcast framework is the strategy. Because before you optimize, promote, or scale anything, you have to understand what the data is actually telling you. Strategy is the investigation. And once you have that, well, everything else becomes the action that you can really trust. And by the way, if you're hearing this and thinking, okay, Leah, I need you to look at my podcast data with me. Well, that's what I do inside my podcast growth audits. I dig into what's working, what's misleading you, and what you can stop worrying about altogether. The link is below if you want that kind of clarity. Book yours today. All right, so I have something to come clean about. Are you ready? I didn't always lead with strategy. Early on, I was laser focused on production. I built my entire business around making every episode sound crisp, polished, professional. That's what we were known for. The strategy behind why a podcast grows Things like SEO, podcast search optimization, keywords, positioning, that always lived in the background of my mind, but I really didn't lead with it. I thought clients just wanted that quote unquote pretty part. Then one day, a client looked at me in the eye and asked, Leah, why isn't my podcast growing? And I knew the answer, but I hesitated. It hit me like a gut punch. And that hesitation, it reminded me of the bad guys I used to interrogate on the phone. You know, the ones they really knew the answer, but they didn't want to say it out loud. I realized I'd been holding back the most powerful part of what I do. The strategy that turns a great sounding podcast into a growth tool. So I trusted my instincts. And with that particular client, we changed 3 things with her podcast: her name, her cover art, and her keywords. And what happened is that her downloads jumped 61% in 30 days. Nothing else changed. She had the same content quality, the same publishing schedule, the same promotion efforts. We just corrected the signals so that the right people could actually find her. And that moment was proof I wasn't, quote unquote, just a podcast producer. I was a strategist. And my clients needed me to own that. So from that point forward, I stopped playing small. I started building a business around what really drives results, which is SEO-backed strategic podcasting, because that's the most sustainable and effective way to grow your visibility, authority, and have those aligned leads, right? Turning your show into a real business growth tool, not just having great audio. Because here's what I've learned. When the strategy is missing, attraction becomes unfocused. You might be attracting the wrong listeners. You might be ranking for keywords that don't really convert. Or you might be building trust with people who were never meant to become your clients. And that's a positioning issue. And once the investigation is clear, then that attraction becomes intentional instead of accidental, right? And that's when growth stops feeling so random. And this is a pattern that I see constantly. Podcasters come in convinced that they need more episodes, or they need more promotion, or they just need to burn it to the ground and rebrand it all. But that's not the case, right? Instead, I find unclear audience signals, mismatched episode topics, and call to actions that are either MIA or they don't match their listener intent. Nothing is necessarily broken with their podcasts. It's just all misread. And once we correct those signals, then that growth really does follow without piling on more effort. When I worked fraud cases, the fastest way to waste time was chasing the loudest clue instead of the right one. And podcasts are really the same. If you're reacting to metrics without understanding what they're telling you, you're essentially just guessing. And guessing can be expensive. An audit is how we uncover the real story your podcast data is trying to tell you. So if you want answers instead of guesswork, that's exactly what we do inside my podcast growth audit. I investigate what's working, what's misleading you, and what you can stop touching altogether. Again, you can book yours at the link below in the description. And if this episode gave you a little, oh, that explains a lot moment, well, then make sure you're following the show. And until next time, keep your podcast purposeful, keep asking better questions, and above all else, keep your growth seamless, and I'll see you next time.